See, he's made the change. He got rid of your inability to hear and to see what he was doing. And now you can see what God is doing. You can hear from heaven. Amen. You can hear what Jesus is speaking. You can hear how the Spirit is leading. And now you have peace. And then he begins to raise you up. Begins to lift you up. He begins to shower you with blessings. The love, the joy, the peace, the long-suffering, gentleness, meekness, temperance, faith, the Spirit of God. The fruits of the Spirit. The evidence of the Spirit in your life. Then the other side is that he begins to instill in you his personality. He begins to instill in you the power to live, the power to help others, word of wisdom, word of knowledge, discerning of spirits, prophecy, tongues, interpretation, gift of healings, gift of miracles, all those great things. Begin to help others. He begins to raise you up. Amen? And the boy got up. And you get up. When Jesus lifts you up, what happens? You get up. Verse 28. And when Jesus got home and was by himself, his disciples were asking him, why could we not drive it out? That's a valid question. Why couldn't we get it to work in our lives? Why couldn't we get it to work? I believed it, but why didn't it work? How many Christians have you said that? Maybe you don't say it out loud as a Christian. Maybe you thought it. Why isn't it working? It worked for so-and-so. They did it. It worked for Jesus. It worked for his disciples. This man here got his son delivered from a deaf and dumb spirit. Why didn't it work? That's what they asked him. Why could we not drive it out? He answered them, this sort of thing can be driven out only by prayer. The King James says prayer and fasting. When he was coming to the house, his disciples asked him, why could we not cast him out? And he said unto them, this kind can come forth by nothing but by, that's hard to say, by prayer and fasting. This sort of thing can be driven out only by prayer and fasting. What are those two things? That's what we've been saying. Prayer is what? What is prayer? Communication. Conversation. Is prayer not a conversation? Prayer is a conversation. With who? With God. With Jesus. Through the Spirit of God. Amen? Most of us don't get the opportunity to see him face to face. A few people down through the ages have, where Jesus appeared to them and they spoke to him face to face. So ours is through the Spirit. But that's beside the point. The point is, this sort of thing can be driven out only by prayer and fasting. Prayer is what? We say communication, which is, making it easy, conversation. What is conversation? What is conversation? Two people talking, or two persons talking. One listening, one talking, then one talking, and they reverse it, and the other one listening. That's a conversation, isn't it? So this sort of thing can be driven out only by communicating, having a conversation. Prayer, that's what prayer is. Conversation with Jesus, conversation with heaven. And second, what is fasting? It's not some religious sacrament, religious. Fasting is what? Fasting is what? Saying no to what you normally do, or what would normally be done in this situation. Fasting is what? Is saying no to the flesh, setting the flesh aside, and saying yes 100% to what the Spirit wants. Is that not true? You're setting aside the normal activities of the flesh, saying no to them, and allowing the Spirit to have 100% control. Romans says what? If we be led by the Spirit of God, then we are the sons of God. We should not follow after the flesh. Those that follow after the flesh, that mind the things of flesh, are of the flesh. Romans chapter 8 says those that are always thinking about the things of the flesh, what the flesh needs, are of the flesh, but those that are of the Spirit, what? Think of on what the Spirit wants. So what's he saying here? This kind cometh, this sort of thing can be driven out only by having a conversation with Jesus, conversation with heaven, and by fasting. In other words, and by being separated from the life of flesh, having flesh crucified. That's what he's saying. It's not just the act of fasting. If it was just the act of fasting, then the Pharisees could have cast out a lot of demons, right? Everybody in agreement with that? Did the scribes and Pharisees not fast? Sure they did. They did it religiously. They did it because they were told to do it. It wasn't a heartfelt thing. It was a mind thing. It was a belief they had. Remember, we say we're trying to change just a belief into actual reality or actions in our life. So this sort of thing can be driven out by prayer, conversation, and being separated by living in the Spirit, by walking in the Spirit. That's what he's saying here. By fasting. No flesh. What is fasting? No flesh. Not giving in to the appetites of the flesh, not doing anything the flesh wants or desires. Setting that aside and doing only what the Spirit desires. What are you walking in today? Are you walking in the Spirit? What do you do? How do you live your life? Do you live it by the Spirit or do you live it by the flesh? Do you live by everything the flesh wants and desires, or do you live by everything Jesus wants and desires? What are you living your life by today? You have to make that choice. You can answer that for yourself. If you're living in constant conversation with Jesus in the Spirit, through the Spirit of God, and you're walking in the Spirit of God, walking in the Spirit and not in the flesh, then you'll have no trouble casting a deaf and dumb spirit out. You will not have any problems with a deaf and dumb spirit in your life. You will not be able to, no longer will the devil be able to use flesh, the deaf, dumb spirit, to keep you from hearing, because you're in constant conversation with heaven, with Jesus through the Spirit of God, and you're walking in the Spirit, which says what? The flesh has no control in your life. And then the deaf and dumb spirit is cast out. Amen? So it's not just the act of fasting, it's not just the act of prayer, it's having actual conversation with Jesus. That means you listening to him listening to you, each one taking their turn to speak. That's what prayer is. Each has an opportunity to speak, each has an opportunity to listen. But Jesus is God. Yes, he is, and he wants to hear what you have to say, but he also wants you to hear what he has to say. So each one, a good conversation was when each one takes a turn. It's not a very good conversation when one does all the talking and one does all the listening, isn't it? That ain't very fun for the person listening. They never get an opportunity to speak. Some people's prayer lives are like that. God never gets an opportunity to speak. They do all the talking. And he's sitting there saying, "Are you through yet? I have something I want to say. Are you through yet? You got all your words out?" See, conversation is a two-sided thing. One person listens, the other person speaks, and then they reverse. One speaks and the other listens. Amen? So that's constant conversation with heaven, a conversation. This sort of thing can be driven out only by prayer and fasting, only by having a conversation with Jesus in the Spirit, and by fasting or nothing wrong with it. Jesus said, "My disciples will fast," didn't he? He told them, scribes and Pharisees asked him, "Why do your disciples not fast and pray? Why do they not fast?" Well, he said, there'll come a time, not while I'm here, but later on, that they will. But I say to you today that it may take some fasting to get the flesh quiet in your life, but I say to you today that do it according to the Spirit of God. Amen. Conversation, converse